The night was quiet on the strange world. Twin moons floated above the sky, glowing like two pale lanterns. The camp of humans and aliens rested in the valley, their tents set in careful rows near the edge of the forest. A fire burned low in the center, its light flickering against the canvas walls. Guards moved slowly at the edges, their boots pressing into the dry soil, while others lay in their shelters trying to sleep. Mara sat near the small lamp in her tent. She was a soldier, but tonight there was no fight and no mission. She had been chosen as part of the escort for the treaty gathering, and her duty was to watch, wait, and protect. She polished the edge of her gear, though she knew there was little chance she would need it here. The talks between the humans and the alien queen had gone carefully all day. No battles, no shouts, only long words about peace. It was strange to see, because she had grown up hearing that the alien empire was endless and merciless. Yet here their ruler rested in the same camp only a few steps away. The forest outside carried a song of insects and wind. Now and then a distant cry echoed, sharp and haunting, but nothing close came near the camp. The soldiers of both sides had made a wide circle of torches, keeping the shadows back. Still, Mara felt uneasy, as though the quiet held a secret. She leaned back on her pack and tried to let her eyes close. Sleep was needed, but sleep did not come easy in a place like this. Every sound made her ears alert. The canvas of her tent shivered with the soft breeze. She drew her blanket closer and told herself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new duties and she would need her strength. Then she heard it, a faint movement at the entrance of her tent. It was not the sound of boots or armor. It was lighter, more careful, almost like silk brushing against the ground. Mara opened her eyes at once. A shadow moved in, tall and curved, and she reached for the lamp. The figure stepped inside, and the small light revealed her face. It was the queen. Mara froze. The alien queen was taller than any human woman, her form slender but strong, her skin a pale shade that glowed faintly in the lamplight. A thin crown of bone-like ridges marked her head, and her eyes were wide, gleaming with strange colors that shifted like water. She wore no heavy robes now, only a simple garment that covered her shoulders and fell to her knees. Without her armor and without her court, she looked less like a ruler and more like a traveler lost in the night. The queen did not speak. She simply stood inside the tent, watching Mara with a steady gaze. For a moment Mara thought she should rise, bow, or call for the guards, but something in the queen's eyes stopped her. It was not command. It was not threat. It was something else, something almost fragile. Finally Mara spoke, her voice quiet. "Your Majesty, do you need something?" The queen tilted her head slightly, then moved to sit on the ground across from Mara. She lowered herself slowly, her hands resting on her knees, her movements graceful but heavy with thought. Still, she said nothing. Mara felt her heart beat fast. She had never been this close to the queen. During the day, the alien ruler was always surrounded by her attendants, speaking through translators, her voice echoing with authority. Now she was here alone in a soldier's tent without a word. Mara could not understand why. The silence stretched. Mara looked at her lamp, then back at the queen. She wondered if she should speak again. But the queen's gaze remained calm, as though waiting for something she could not name. At last the queen's lips parted. Her voice was low, softer than it had been in the council, and it carried a rhythm like distant waves. "I cannot sleep." The words surprised Mara, not because of their meaning, but because of their plainness. The queen of a great empire, restless in the night, seeking a place to sit in silence. Mara did not know what answer to give. "You came here because you cannot sleep?" she asked, careful to keep her tone respectful. The queen gave a small nod. "The forest speaks too much. The cries of the night creatures remind me of battles long gone. My rest is broken." Her eyes turned toward the tent wall where the shadows of branches swayed. For a moment she seemed far away, lost in memory. Mara lowered her hands from her gear and folded them in her lap. She studied the alien ruler in the quiet glow. Without guards, without banners, the queen seemed less like a distant figure of power and more like another traveler caught in the same endless sky. The queen's gaze returned to Mara. "Do you fear me, human soldier?" Mara held her breath. She knew the honest answer would be yes. Every story, every report, every history lesson had said the queen's kind were a force that crushed worlds. But in this moment, looking into her weary eyes, Mara felt something different. "I do not know what to feel," Mara said. "You are powerful. But now you seem tired." The Queen's lips curved in what might have been the faintest smile, though it vanished quickly. "Tired, yes. An empire is heavy. My people see me as a pillar that never bends, but I bend in silence. Tonight I bend here." Mara was not sure what to say. She shifted slightly, then spoke in a low tone. "Sometimes when I cannot sleep, I sit by the fire. I listen to the sparks. It helps." The Queen tilted her head again, studying her as though Mara's words carried a secret. Then she lowered her eyes. "Your kind is strange. So simple yet so steady. I came here because I thought perhaps your quiet would be different from mine." The tent was filled with silence again, but this time it felt less heavy. Mara realized the Queen had not come for answers. She had come only to share the silence with another living soul. Outside, a guard's step crunched softly on the dirt, then faded. The fire crackled in the distance. Inside the tent, the Queen sat without moving, her breathing slow and calm. Mara relaxed little by little, letting her body settle. The night stretched on. Neither spoke more than a few words. Once Mara asked if the Queen wished for more light, but the Queen shook her head. Once the Queen asked if humans often dreamed, and Mara told her they did. After that, the words faded, leaving only the shared quiet. The moons moved higher in the sky and the air grew cooler. Mara pulled her blanket tighter, but she did not feel alone anymore. The presence of the Queen was strange yet steady, like a shadow that chose not to frighten. At last the Queen rose. Her movements were smooth, her tall form bending beneath the tent's ceiling. She gave Mara one last look, her eyes softer than before. "You listened," the Queen said simply. "That is enough." Then she turned and left as quietly as she had come, the canvas falling shut behind her. Mara sat still, her heart still racing, though in a different way. She had just spent an hour with the ruler of a vast empire, and no guards had seen, no leaders had known. Nothing had been signed, no command had been given. Yet something had changed. She lay back on her pack and closed her eyes at last. Sleep came more easily now, though she did not know why. The night held its cries and whispers, but they no longer felt the same. In the quiet valley beneath the twin moons, a soldier and a queen had shared a moment that neither council nor treaty could have written. And though it seemed small, Mara knew it was the beginning of something greater. Morning came to the valley with soft golden light. The twin moons faded slowly as the sun rose, and mist drifted across the tents. Birds with long wings circled in the air, their calls sharp and strange. The camp woke with the sound of footsteps, quiet voices, and the clatter of pots as meals were prepared. Soldiers stretched their stiff limbs, checking gear, while envoys gathered their notes for the day's talks. Mara woke with the memory of the night still fresh in her mind. The Queen's presence lingered in her thoughts like a dream that was too sharp to fade. She wondered if it had truly happened. The alien Queen, slipping into her tent in silence, speaking of sleepless nights and leaving without a guard knowing. Mara rubbed her eyes and looked around. Nothing in her tent had changed. Yet she knew the truth. When she stepped outside, the cool air touched her face. Other soldiers greeted her with nods, and she returned the gesture. They looked calm, unaware of what she had seen. She wondered if she should tell someone. Should she report it to her captain? Should she warn the envoys that the Queen was restless? But something stopped her. The Queen had trusted her with that moment. To speak of it now felt like breaking something fragile. The camp gathered at the central fire. The human envoys, dressed in clean uniforms, spoke with the alien attendants. The Queen herself did not appear. She remained in her own tent, hidden by tall guards in armor that gleamed faintly in the sunlight. Mara watched the tent for a long time, remembering how different the Queen had looked without her crown of command. The morning passed with small tasks. Mara checked the perimeter with 2 other guards, walked the circle of torches, and studied the forest edge. The trees rose tall and twisted, their branches heavy with wide leaves. Now and then something moved within, but nothing came close. The peace was steady but tense, like a bowstring drawn but not released. When midday came, the Treaty Council gathered again. Inside the large central tent, humans and aliens sat across from one another at a long table. Translators repeated each word carefully. The air was heavy with caution. The humans spoke of trade, shared borders, and safe passages. The aliens spoke of boundaries, resources, and the need for trust. Every sentence was measured, every answer tested. Mara stood guard at the entrance. She did not speak, only listened. She noticed how often the Queen's name was spoken with respect. Yet she also noticed that when the queen herself entered, the air in the tent shifted. Everyone sat straighter. Everyone grew quiet. The queen moved with calm grace, her eyes bright, her crown gleaming once more. None could guess that only hours before she had sat quietly in the tent of a common soldier. The talks went on for hours. Some progress was made, though slowly. When the council ended, the queen left with her attendants. Mara returned to her post at the edge of the camp. She felt both smaller and greater at once. Smaller, because the affairs of rulers seemed so far above her. Greater, because she had seen the queen as no one else here had. That night the fire burned again in the valley. The camp settled into its rhythm of meals and rest. Mara ate with her unit, listening to the chatter of soldiers. They spoke of home, of food they missed, of battles they remembered. No one spoke of the queen except in whispers far away. Mara kept silent, though her mind was restless. When darkness grew deep and the moons rose high, Mara sat in her tent again. She wondered if the queen would return. She told herself it had only been chance. A single night, a single hour. Why would it happen again? Yet as the air cooled and the camp grew still, she felt it. The same quiet movement at the tent's edge. The shadow brushed against the canvas. Mara's breath caught. The flap lifted. The queen stepped inside once more. She looked the same as before, tall, graceful, dressed in simple garments, her crown absent. Her eyes caught the lamplight, reflecting soft colors. She sat again across from Mara without a word. Mara swallowed, unsure what to say. At last she spoke. "You could not sleep again?" The queen nodded once. Her voice was calm but low. "The night is long. The forest does not rest. My mind follows it." Mara hesitated, then asked, "Do you not have attendants to comfort you? Advisors to help?" "I have many," the queen said. "But they are walls, not windows. They tell me what I already know. They remind me of duty, not of peace. With them I am always the queen. Here I am not only that." Her words were slow, measured, yet they held a weight that pressed against the silence. Mara leaned forward slightly. "What do you find here, then?" The queen's eyes met hers. A listener. The word sank into Mara's chest. She had thought herself nothing more than a guard, but the queen's gaze told her otherwise. So they spoke. Not of war, not of treaties, but of simple things. Mara told her about the rivers of earth, wide and restless, carrying ships and stories. She spoke of the mountains that rose like giants, where snow covered the peaks year-round. She told of the fields where children ran, chasing one another under a single bright sun. Her voice grew steady as she remembered, and the queen listened closely, her eyes never leaving Mara's face. In turn, the queen shared fragments of her own world. She spoke of cities built inside crystal caves glowing with inner light. She described great spires rising from oceans, their tops catching storms and bending lightning into power. She told of the first songs of her people, sung not with words but with harmonies that echoed in the bones. Their voices wove a quiet bond in the night. The tent felt smaller, warmer, filled not with silence but with stories. At one point, Mara noticed the queen's shoulders ease, the tension lifting slightly. The alien ruler seemed lighter, almost human in her stillness. Mara realized then how much weight she must carry each day. The queen's voice softened. "Your people are young, yet you speak as if you have lived through ages." Mara shook her head. "We are not old, but we have faced much. Every step forward was hard. We learned to endure. That is what we know best." The queen studied her, then spoke quietly. "Perhaps that is why I came. To sit near endurance, to see if it is real." They sat in silence again, but it was not empty. It was full of unspoken understanding. The forest outside whispered. The fire crackled faintly in the distance. At last the queen rose, just as she had before. She gave Mara a long look, her eyes calm and searching. "Tomorrow I will be a queen again, but tonight I'm only one who cannot sleep." She turned and left, the flap falling shut. Mara sat still long after, her heart steady but full. She knew now that this was no chance. The queen had chosen her tent, chosen her silence, chosen her listening ear, and in that choice a bridge had begun to form. As the moons drifted higher and the camp slept, Mara closed her eyes at last. She did not know what tomorrow's talks would bring. She did not know if peace would hold. But she knew one thing. The queen would return, and with her would come something more than words of politics. It would be the start of trust built in the quiet hours of sleepless nights. The next day began with a pale dawn. Mist hung low across the valley, and the sounds of the forest seemed sharper than before. The camp stirred awake as fires were lit and the smell of simple meals spread through the air. Soldiers stretched their arms and shook off the night. Envoys gathered their notes for another round of talks. Mara rose with heavy thoughts. She had slept, but her dreams had been strange. She dreamed of rivers and crystal caves, of mountains and spires rising from oceans. She dreamed of voices, one human and one alien, speaking softly in the night. She woke with a sense that the boundary between memory and dream had grown thin. She moved through her tasks in silence. The Queen's attendants walked past her at one point, their heads high, their eyes unreadable. None of them looked at Mara directly. She wondered if any of them knew where their ruler had gone in the night. If they did, they gave no sign. The treaty council began again in the great tent. Mara took her place near the entrance. The talks were long, filled with careful words. Humans spoke of alliances while the aliens spoke of boundaries. Both sides moved slowly, each step forward shadowed by hesitation. The Queen was present, seated at the far end. Her crown rested lightly on her head, her posture steady, her voice calm. She looked every part the ruler of a vast empire. Yet when her eyes passed briefly over Mara, just for a second Mara thought she saw a spark of something else. A memory shared, hidden from the others. The hours dragged on. Outside the tent, the forest grew restless. The guards reported movements among the trees. Shadows shifted in ways that were not just branches in the wind. Birds cried sharply and then fell silent. Even the air seemed to grow tense. When the council ended for the day, Mara joined the patrol at the edge of the camp. The forest loomed, thick and dark, with mist still clinging to the ground. She moved slowly, her hand near her weapon, though she did not expect a battle. Peace was fragile, and any clash here would shatter it. As they walked, one soldier muttered, "I do not like this silence. It feels like watching eyes." Mara agreed in her heart. The forest seemed alive with more than insects and birds. Yet nothing came close, and so the patrol returned without alarm. That night the fire burned lower than before. The envoys stayed quiet, their voices heavy with caution. Soldiers ate their meals quickly and returned to their tents. Even the laughter that sometimes rose in small groups was gone. The camp felt as though it was holding its breath. Mara sat alone in her tent, listening to the sounds outside. She wondered if the Queen would return. Her heart wanted it, though her mind told her not to expect it. Still, she left the lamp burning. The night deepened. The moons rose, casting silver light across the valley. The forest whispered again with unseen movements. Then softly the flap of her tent lifted. The Queen stepped inside. Mara felt a calm wash over her at the sight. The Queen looked the same as before, tall, graceful, her crown absent. She lowered herself onto the ground across from Mara. No guards, no attendants, no courtly words. "You came again," Mara said softly. The Queen's eyes held hers. Yes, sleep would not come, Mara nodded. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you feel the forest is restless?" The Queen tilted her head slightly. "I do. There is movement beyond the trees. Not of beasts, but of something with purpose. I do not think it threatens yet, but it watches." Mara's breath slowed. "Do your people sense it too?" "They will not say," the Queen replied. "My guards believe their presence is enough to keep all danger away. But I do not believe danger listens to pride." Her voice carried weight. Mara understood then that the Queen had not only come for silence. She had come to share concern. So Mara spoke of human struggles once more. She told of nights when storms raged across oceans and ships had to hold steady against waves taller than towers. She told of cities rebuilt after disasters, of people standing again even when all seemed lost. "We do not wait for peace to be handed to us," Mara said. "We create it piece by piece, even in the middle of chaos." The Queen listened, her eyes steady. "Your words carry strength. My people have forgotten this. We have sought control for so long that we forgot how to endure without it." Mara leaned forward. "Maybe that is why you cannot sleep. You carry control like armor, but inside you still feel the weight. Sometimes to rest you must put it down." The Queen's gaze softened. "And you think you can teach me this?" Mara shook her head. "Not teach, only show. You already seek it by coming here." Silence filled the tent again, but it was warm silence. The Queen's shoulders lowered, the tension easing just slightly. Her eyes closed for a moment, as though she allowed herself to rest even while awake. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the Queen said, "I do not know if my empire can change. But perhaps I can." The words hung in the air. Mara did not answer right away. She only sat there, breathing slow, letting the quiet hold them both. Outside, a cry rose from the forest, sharp, long, and strange. The queen's eyes opened at once. Mara reached for her weapon, her body tense. But the sound faded and no danger came. The queen did not rise. She looked at Mara again. "When danger comes, as it always does, will your people stand?" Mara met her gaze without fear. "Yes, that is what we do." The queen studied her for a long time. Then she gave a single nod. "Perhaps that is why I am here, to see it with my own eyes." She rose slowly, tall and steady in the lamplight. Before leaving, she placed her hand gently against Mara's arm, the same gesture she had given once before. "You are not only a listener, you are a reminder." Then she turned and stepped out into the night. Mara sat still, her skin warm where the queen's hand had rested. The cry of the forest still echoed faintly in her mind, but she no longer feared it as much. She felt stronger, as though the bond between them carried its own shield. As she lay down to rest, Mara realized the nights ahead would not grow easier. Something was moving in the dark, watching both camps. Yet she also knew that a bridge had been built, fragile but real. Between human endurance and alien weight, something new was forming. Sleep came to her at last, deep and steady, under the silver light of the twin moons. The fourth day in the valley began with unease. The sun rose, yet the warmth did not chase away the heavy stillness. Soldiers moved with sharper steps, and their eyes searched the tree line more often. The envoys whispered together, their hands full of notes, while the queen's attendants spoke in quiet voices among themselves. Something unseen pressed against the camp like the weight of a storm before rain. Mara felt it too. Her hand brushed the hilt of her weapon more often than before. She watched the forest and listened for sounds that did not belong. The memory of the queen's words returned to her, of danger that did not listen to pride. The council met again at midday. Inside the large tent, the air was thick with tension. Humans spoke of agreements, of lines drawn on maps, of resources shared. The aliens responded carefully, their eyes shifting as if measuring every syllable. The queen sat at the far end, her crown set upon her brow, her face calm and unreadable. Only Mara, standing guard at the entrance, remembered how that same face had looked in the quiet lamplight of her tent. But even the council could not ignore the sounds outside. Twice during the talks, guards entered to report movement near the forest edge. Both sides tried to continue, yet unease grew like a shadow across the table. By evening, the camp was restless. Torches were set closer together. Patrols doubled their watch. The fire at the center burned brighter, as though its flame alone could hold back the dark. Soldiers from both races spoke less, their voices falling into short sentences. Mara ate her meal quickly and returned to her post. The forest stretched wide and black before her. The mist of the valley curled low around the trees. She thought of home, of nights when storms rolled in across the plains, of how the air grew still before thunder struck. This silence felt the same. When the moons climbed high, Mara returned to her tent. She sat near the lamp, waiting without knowing why. Her body was tired, yet her heart was alert. She wondered if the queen would come again. She almost told herself it was foolish to expect it, but then the flap stirred. The queen entered, her tall frame bending slightly as she stepped inside. She carried no crown, no guards, no sign of command. Her eyes caught the lamplight, and for a moment they looked tired, like a traveler who had walked too long without rest. Mara greeted her softly. "You could not sleep?" The queen lowered herself to the ground, sitting across from her as before. "No, the air is restless. Even my guards feel it now, though they speak of it only in whispers." Mara nodded. "Our soldiers feel it too." They sat in silence for a time, the crackle of the distant fire reaching faintly through the tent walls. The queen studied Mara, her gaze steady. "Do you believe danger waits in the forest?" Mara thought of the shadows moving among the trees, the cries that rose and fell in the night. "Yes," she said simply, "but I do not believe it waits forever." The queen's lips curved slightly, though not into a smile. "Then perhaps tonight we are tested, not by words at a council table, but by what lies beyond it." Mara leaned forward. "If danger comes, will your people stand beside mine?" The queen tilted her head, considering. "My people are taught to stand for the empire, not beside others. Yet if the empire falls, standing alone will mean nothing." Her eyes softened. "Perhaps that is why I sit here, to see if it is possible." Before Mara could answer, a cry split the night. It was not the cry of a bird or a beast. It was sharper, closer, filled with purpose. The camp stirred at once. Boots striking the ground, shouts rising, weapons drawn. Mara leapt to her feet. The queen rose as well, tall and steady. The flap lifted and a guard rushed in, his eyes wide. Movement in the forest, he said. Figures approaching fast. The queen did not flinch. She turned to Mara. Walk with me. Together they stepped out into the night. The camp was alive with motion. Soldiers lit more torches, their flames pushing against the mist. Envoys hurried to safety while guards formed lines at the edge of the circle. Beyond the light, shadows moved, tall, quick, and many. The forest whispered with their steps. Mara felt her chest tighten, but she stood firm. This was no council, no room for careful words. This was the moment when endurance mattered. The queen stepped forward, her attendants gathering around her, but she lifted a hand to hold them back. She spoke, her voice calm yet carrying across the camp. Stand together. Do not break lines. Whatever watches us must see we do not scatter. Her people obeyed at once, falling into place. Human soldiers did the same, though some cast wary glances toward their alien allies. Mara moved to the queen's side, her weapon ready. The shadows paused at the edge of the torchlight. Dozens of shapes stood just beyond sight, silent and waiting. Their forms were tall and crooked, their eyes glimmering faintly in the dark. The camp held its breath. The queen spoke again, softer this time, only to Mara. They test us. If we show fear, they will strike. Mara gripped her weapon tighter. Then we will not show fear. For long moments, nothing moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath as much as the camp did. Then slowly, the shapes began to fade back into the mist. One by one, they vanished into the trees until only shadows remained. Silence followed, heavy and deep. The soldiers did not relax until the queen lifted her hand. Hold the watch, she commanded. The night is not yet over. She turned to Mara, her eyes gleaming with quiet strength. You stood without trembling. Your kind truly does endure. Mara exhaled at last. We have no other choice. The queen looked toward the forest once more. Nor do I. Perhaps endurance is the only crown worth wearing. The camp slowly settled again, though no one returned to sleep. Torches burned bright. Weapons stayed close at hand, and every ear listened for another sound from the trees. Yet no more cries came. Back in her tent, Mara sat with the queen for a while longer. Neither spoke much. Words were no longer needed. They had faced the same shadow together, and that was enough. When dawn finally touched the valley, it found humans and aliens standing side by side, weary but unbroken. The forest remained quiet, but the memory of the night lingered. For Mara, one truth was clear. The bond between her and the sleepless queen was no longer only silence and stories. It had become something greater, trust born in the face of shadow. And though the nights ahead would still hold fear, she knew they would stand together. The valley woke to a heavy silence after the night of shadows. Mist still clung to the trees and torches burned low, their smoke curling into the cool air. Both humans and aliens stood in weary lines, their weapons close, their eyes red from lack of sleep. No one had rested well. Every ear had strained for sounds from the forest. Every eye had watched the tree line. Yet morning had come, and the shapes of the night had not returned. Mara stretched her stiff arms, blinking against the pale light. She looked across the camp at the queen's tent. Guards stood straight at its entrance, their armor shining with dew. The queen herself had not been seen since the forest had grown quiet. But Mara knew she would appear. The queen always appeared when it mattered. As the camp stirred, envoys whispered together, their notes in hand. Some argued for retreat, fearing another night would bring disaster. Others pressed for stronger defenses, saying the council could not be abandoned now. Both sides felt the weight of the shadows. When the sun climbed higher, the queen stepped from her tent. She wore her crown once more, her shoulders square, her steps calm. At once the camp grew silent. Soldiers bowed their heads, envoys ceased their debate, and all eyes turned toward her. Mara watched closely, remembering the queen as she had seen her in the quiet of her tent, without crown, without command, only a sleepless traveler. The woman before her now looked like a different being, but Mara knew they were the same. The queen raised her voice, steady and clear. The forest has tested us. It watched to see if we would scatter. We did not scatter. We stood. This is the answer it will carry back into the dark. Her words carried across the valley. Both humans and aliens listened. Some faces eased with pride, others with doubt, but no one turned away. The council gathered once more in the central tent. Mara stood guard at the entrance, her ears catching every word. The air inside was thick with tension. The humans spoke of the night as proof that danger in this world was greater than either race had thought. The aliens spoke of it as a sign that strength must be shown. At last the queen lifted her hand and silence fell. She looked from one side of the table to the other, her eyes sharp but calm. The danger does not care for borders. It does not ask if one belongs to Empire or Earth. It only seeks to test. If we remain divided, it will see weakness. If we stand together, it will see strength. That is the truth of this place. The human envoy, a man with gray hair and a lined face, leaned forward. And you believe your people can truly stand beside ours? The queen's gaze did not shift. I believe they must. Alone we are only prey for the shadows. Together we are something more. The alien attendants murmured, surprised at her open words. Some bowed their heads, others frowned in thought. But none spoke against her. Mara felt her chest tighten. The queen was not only speaking as a ruler. She was speaking as one who had sat in silence beside a human soldier, who had felt the truth of endurance in the dark. The talk stretched long into the day. Arguments rose and fell, but the queen's words carried weight that none could ignore. By evening, the outlines of an alliance had begun to take shape. Nothing final was signed, but the path had been drawn. When the council ended, Mara returned to her post at the edge of the camp. She watched the forest still and quiet, though she did not trust it. The memory of the shapes lingered. She thought of the queen's steady voice, of her calm strength. She thought, too, of the hand that had rested once on her arm, a gesture not of command but of trust. That night the camp held its breath once more. Torches burned bright, guards paced with sharp eyes, and weapons rested ready. Yet the forest remained still. No cries rose, no shadows came. It was as though the dark itself respected the strength shown the night before. Mara sat in her tent, the lamp glowing faintly. She did not know if the queen would come again. Perhaps now that her words had been spoken openly, she no longer needed the quiet of a soldier's tent. But as the moons climbed high, Mara heard the soft brush at the flap. The queen entered, her crown absent, her face calm but weary. She lowered herself across from Mara, just as she had every night before. "You spoke with strength today," Mara said softly. The queen inclined her head, strength borrowed from silence. From one who listened when no one else would. Mara shook her head. "It was already yours. You only needed to remember." The queen studied her for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice low. "I once believed endurance was weakness, that only conquest was strength. But I see now that endurance is the only reason any race survives. It is the crown that does not break." Mara's chest warmed at the words. She had spoken of rivers and storms, of mountains and fields, and the queen had listened. Now those stories had taken root. For a long while they sat in quiet, the lamp burning low, the sounds of the camp soft around them. The bond between them no longer felt fragile. It felt steady, built of nights of silence, of stories, and of standing side by side when shadows tested them. At last the queen rose. She looked down at Mara, her eyes steady and bright. "Tomorrow the council will write the first lines of alliance. But know this, those lines began here in the silence of your tent. Do not forget it." Mara stood as well, her heart steady. "I will not forget." The queen gave her a final nod, then stepped out into the night, her tall form fading into the silver light of the moons. Mara remained still for a moment, the tent quiet around her. Then she sat once more, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She felt no fear of the forest now. The shadows might return, but they would find something stronger than fear waiting for them. When dawn touched the valley, the camp stirred again. Humans and aliens gathered, their faces tired but hopeful. The queen stood before them, her crown gleaming in the light, her voice calm and sure. She spoke of endurance, of unity, of strength that came not from conquest but from standing together. And as her words carried across the valley, Mara knew they were more than speeches. They were truths born in silence and sleepless nights, in the bond of two beings who had chosen trust over fear. The treaty would be written, the alliance tested, and the shadows would rise again. But humanity had shown itself. The queen had seen it. And now the galaxy itself would know. For the first time since she had stepped foot in the valley, Mara felt peace. Not the peace of silence, but the peace of knowing that when the shadows came, they would not face them alone.